Hey, welcome. This is the Left Coast Atheists. Just one of us, actually, so it's singular, Left Coast Atheists. My name's Jon F. McDropout. I'm here with Ozymandias Ramses II and Jibran Ludwig. I approached you guys a little while ago to discuss Van Til's Why I Believe in God. It's one of the, I think, one of the more well-known presup pamphlets that was put out by Van Til, and it's one of those things that really struck me when I first read it, and it's got a little bit of the element of the presup in it, so I thought we could just start off with a discussion of it. So welcome, guys, and thanks for joining me.
No, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Might it help to say a little bit about who Cornelius Van Til is? And
Sure, I bet you'd have a much better idea of the history of Van Til. So if you could lay it down maybe a little biography before we get started.
Okay, well, I can't lay out a biography because I don't know enough about him. But he is a theologian in the Reformed Calvinistic tradition, and he wrote primarily I believe in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. And he is essentially the author of presuppositionalism as we know it today, and one of his intellectual successors, his protege, was the late Greg Bahnsen, and there have been others since then, John Frame and Gordon Clark and others. But Cornelius Van Til is the fellow who got this ball rolling, and the occasion of this discussion, this hangout, is Jon F. McDropout suggested that we take a look at an article he wrote. It's written in the style of a conversation, a one-sided conversation, an imaginary or hypothetical conversation, where Cornelius Van Til is talking to an imaginary atheist, and it's called Why I Believe in God. And it's not very long. It's about 15 pages or so. And so I believe that all three of us here have read it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about today. And Jibran, you wanted to start. You had some comments or some observations you wanted to make about it?
Yeah, I wanted to frame it a little bit because it is written in a somewhat odd style, and my suggestion is that rather than reading it as a message to someone, because it uses you a lot, the pronoun you, he seems to be addressing the reader, but I would contend that he's not. He's instead sort of, it's essentially a Socratic dialogue between you, who is this hypothetical atheist, who the reader may or may not identify with, and Van Til himself. And I just think framing it in that context makes the entire pamphlet make much more sense, because I've sent it to a few people now, and they've very quickly been very confused by it. I think it's important to, I think it's valuable to read it as if it were a Socratic dialogue or something in that vein. So that's all I wanted to say. It's just framing the whole thing.
Yeah, that's very much the spirit in which it was written, I think. He just, like a Socratic dialogue, a dialogue written by Plato about Socrates, for instance, where Socrates is sort of the main player, is always presented as a discussion between Socrates and one or more other characters, and you get to hear what the other characters say. In this instance, there's only one voice talking all the way through, but it won't make any sense unless you posit that there is an imaginary person to whom he is talking and addressing directly. He's anticipating objections on behalf of the person. He says, well, for instance, now you're probably, yes, oh, you say this? Yeah, of course you would say that, but here's what I would say to that, and that sort of thing. So it's one side of a conversation, but it's kind of like a comedy bit. When Bob Newhart does a comedy bit where he's on the phone and you're only hearing his end of the conversation, and it's still hilarious because you're able to infer correctly what the other person who isn't speaking would have been saying. So the whole thing actually does make sense, provided you posit essentially an atheist with a sort of modern, secular, scientific worldview who doesn't buy any of this stuff about God and Christianity and all that sort of stuff. And in the course of this, Cornelius Van Til is explaining how he sees things, and he talks about it in the context of his upbringing, and he's trying to scotch certain standard objections that someone with a worldview similar to my own actually would raise, the kinds of objections we would raise in a typical conversation with a Christian. And he's trying to, in the course of this, expose what the what someone like me is presupposing he thinks, and how these sorts of things essentially beg the question against his view, and he's trying to sort of turn that around and show that these objections are really not very good.
I'd actually say that what he's trying to demonstrate is that we're really begging the question insofar as that we're proving that his God exists by being forced to use it. So
yeah. No, that's where he's going ultimately. Yeah, no, please go on though. That's exactly right.
Yeah. He's saying that we're sneaking in the premise that God exists into our argument against the existence of God, and so it's kind of the opposite of begging the question to some extent. The problem is that he spends pretty much the entire article or pamphlet. He doesn't really get into the argument itself. He sort of, as John said, he's kind of opening the atheist up. He's getting them buttered up for the actual argument, but he really doesn't present it in much of a form. He kind of claims the argument's conclusion, but he doesn't present the premises or go through with the argument. And I think that is personally my biggest problem with the argument, is that it is not presented in this form. It's not presented in a coherent form where it actually goes from the premises to the conclusion, or more accurately from the premise God does not exist to the conclusion that there's a contradiction in that statement. And because of that, it kind of falls flat, even though I think it's a fairly well-written pamphlet, and it brings up some interesting points. It fails to present its basic argument.
Yeah, that's very much how I saw it. John, did you want to say something?
I was just thinking about that. It is interesting to think of it as, not presenting the entire presup argument. I was just wondering if that, maybe they did that on purpose, or, and I was trying to think of it as, is this pamphlet sort of a how to speak to atheists? Like, would this be considered a witnessing technique brochure in some ways, like a learning tool that other Christians could use, or was it more of just a very philosophical kind of in-house dialogue, about the finer points of the theology?
I actually thought of it. I mean, that question hadn't occurred to me while I was reading it, but I would certainly like it if presuppositionalists read this. Mm-hmm. Because it's a polite conversation. It's not full of silly stumping questions. It tries to anticipate a lot of standard objections that a presuppositionalist is going to get. Some of them are not objections that I would raise myself, but these are objections that are raised by people when talking to presuppositionalists. And he handles those fairly handsomely, I thought. And I would like it if more presuppositionalists on YouTube and such would actually read this, and no doubt some of them have, but I mean, take this to heart, how he presents his case here. I agree with Jibran, he doesn't sort of make the full case, but I don't think he's trying to make the full case for presuppositionalism. What I think he's trying to do is scotch certain standard objections and show, well, wait a minute, some of these objections beg the question. And what I mean by beg the question is they assume too much against the presuppositionalist. And Jibran's completely right that the conclusion that he's going towards, that Van Til is that ultimately you are, by virtue of making these arguments and objections, presupposing his God, borrowing capital from his worldview, as it's sometimes said. So that's where he's going with that. But he doesn't actually spell out that case. That's what's missing from this. Nevertheless, I like the way he proceeds. It's thoughtful and it's intelligent, and it shows, well, look, some of these objections really aren't very good. One of the big objections that he anticipates is this objection of, well, it's an accident of birth. You happen to be born and reared and educated in a Christian community and family and country, and so of course this is your worldview. But for that fact, you might be a Muslim now if you'd grown up somewhere else. And he does a really good job of showing, well, essentially this is nothing to the point, and then he turns the table on his imaginary atheist by saying, well, yes, okay, I have drunk in and had poured down my throat my
Yeah.
Christianity and theism, but you have had your sort of secular atheistic view poured down your throat.
Sure. I got the quote right here actually. It's if you want to say that belief was poured down my throat, I shall retort by saying that unbelief was poured down yours.
Yeah,
So it's a very much like he's saying that our presuppositions have affected our the way that we were brought up has affected the way that we are now viewing the world, and it's I mean he's making a very good point in that sense. I really like the idea of the accident of birth, and then building on that. Because I mean there is a lot to debate over that, right? Just I think he even mentions that I mean the accident of birth is sort of they go into it because the debate concerning heredity and environment is prominent in his day, right? So there's a lot of background information there that he's kind of taking in and using to his advantage, right? So I really like that idea, especially to see it from it's such an old pamphlet, or an old pamphlet for me, anyways. That it's interesting to see what was current modern theology back then and modern evidence, what I considered modern evidences back then. So there's an interesting kind of retro style to it, I guess you'd say.
yeah. What year was it written? I don't remember.
I tried to find out. It has a no date on it. So I guess the press never listed the date. But it has to be after 1968. That was the first time that he ever puts anything on the Presbyterian Church press. So so I think that's the earliest it could have been. But
Okay, that makes sense.
Can I raise an objection to something that you both have claimed? I don't think that he actually does a very good job of addressing that argument, the argument about accident of birth, because he very specifically says that what is important here is that, or it is important to recognize that both of us were born in a Christian nation, in the Christian world, and that completely undercuts his point. I agree with him to some extent. I agree with him. I think it is invalid to say, well, you just believe in your God because you were born into a family that believes it, and therefore it's invalid. No, I think that that's a terrible argument. But his point that it has nothing to do with his background, or he kind of embraces it and he kind of defends against it. It's a mix there. I think it's undercut though by him quite outrightly saying that it is important that he was born in the Christian world.
Yeah, no, that's a good objection. You're right. He does undercut himself there. But in his defense, I would say, well, you can grow up in a Christian country, as I did, as many people did. But I mean, a lot of people grow up in a Christian nation that is essentially nominally Christian, I mean, an ever-growing number of people are growing up in nominally Christian countries. That is, there's no state religion, and a lot of people are Christian in name only. They might go to church, they might not. They sort of self-identify as weakly as Christian. But they have grown up with an entirely secular worldview and gone to public schools that have been evacuated of religious teachings in the curriculum, from the curriculum. So he might have something in mind like that. That we both grew up in a Christian nation, in a Christian country, and where Christianity was sort of foundational to the existence of the civilization that we're in. I mean, he says something about Christian civilization, I think is what he says.
Yeah, you're right.
And so, I grew up in Canada. I'm part of a sort of a Christian civilization, but many people don't grow up Christian as a result because they have not had Christianity poured down their throats. But what I did like about the argument was it scotches this idea that atheism is a kind of default view. This is something I really disagree with quite profoundly. That atheism is a default view. We grow up. We're born not believing in a God. That's true, but we're born not able to opine on the matter at all. But there comes a point in our life where we hear about God, and there comes a point in our lives where not only do we hear about God, but we're capable of forming an opinion one way or the other. And I think it's at that point that one can be properly described as an atheist, or an agnostic, or a theist, and not before. Just as it's not right to say,
Sure.
6-month-old child that the child is Muslim. It's wrong to characterize a 6-month-old child as an atheist. Now, this is slightly a separate argument, and while it's true that a 6-month-old child doesn't believe in a God, a 6-month-old child can't opine on the question at all. And so I think it's sort of false to fact, because these are terms that describe an attitude towards a certain proposition. You know, do you agree with this proposition or disagree with this proposition, however strongly or weakly you feel about it, whatever your reasons are. And so I think that, you know, in a secular world, we really do grow up having a secular atheistic worldview poured down our throats. It's not done maliciously. It's not done as deliberate indoctrination. But, you know, that's just the way it is when you grow up in a worldview. You just take on the assumptions of whatever is around you, including assumptions about what doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah. I honestly two things on that. It would be like to say a 6-month-old is an atheist is to say that, or would be equivalent to saying that a 6-month-old doesn't believe in evolution. I mean, it's true, but they have no conception of it, and so it's kind of a meaningless claim. Although I'd like to object to the second thing you said, though. I don't. For example, I was raised in a family that was certainly not religious, but where everyone in it believes in this kind of vague, positive God, but they wouldn't call it God because that term is religiously associated. And so I don't necessarily think it's fair to say that this sort of secular worldview is necessarily poured down on our throats, unless we're using secular correctly to mean a-religious, not regarding religion at all. In which case I would agree with you, but the part where I disagree is the atheistic part. I was raised in a family of people that believe in reincarnation and the soul. And I believed that until I was about 8, and then I became an atheist because it was cool. And then I've slowly actually come up with good reasons for that, and it changed my view a bit. But yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, though. I don't entirely agree that the secular worldview is necessarily poured down our throats. However, I had a very odd upbringing, and so I may not be a good representation in this case.
Well, I don't think it matters how representative you are. I know, and I'll take the Philip that it's perhaps overstating it to say that it's poured down your throat, but I mean,
I appreciate his point, though, that we're biased, even though we're atheists. I like that a lot. I think it's important to remember that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you don't have to apologize for interrupting. Let's just interrupt each other.
That sounds good.
There's only 3 of us. It works.
Exactly.
You know? When there's 8
no,
people.
I think maybe he's stating it in a little bit hyperbolic sense. You know, he's trying to prove maybe just show the extreme from his position, or what he sees as the extreme from his position. But you know, I took when I first read this, I took great exception to it, because I actually relate more to his upbringing than the atheist's upbringing, and you know, I had belief poured down my throat, I would say, and you know, for me, it's an interest. It's a little bit. It's almost like he's not talking to me, you know, or talking over my head a little bit when he's describing, you know, his experience of his life, and then saying that, you know, well, it's the same as anybody else, and you know, I just believe because, you know, that's what I was told. It's sort of, you know, you like that's why I felt like it was maybe undercutting himself a little bit with the example, but I think as hyperbole, it actually makes maybe a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, I think it. Aside from the hyperbole, like, there's a couple of points. Actually, there's some background noise here. Is that a problem? Can you hear that?
It's gone now.
It's gone now, no problem.
Okay. I mean, the argument, in part, is sort of scotched this sort of ad hominem to try to dismiss a person's beliefs by appealing to their upbringing. You know, you only believe this because, you know, this is what you learned. This is individual, because any specific individual
Ozzy, can you just
comes by their
repeat that
beliefs
last
however
line
they
there?
come.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you're breaking up there. Sorry, Oz, if you could repeat the last sentence you said there.
Sure. I'm just going to turn down my camera resolution here, limit my bandwidth a little bit, so that if I can.
Cool. What's limited now?
Actually, I'm not sure if I can be heard.
I can hear you now.
I can hear you.
I'll bring up your volume here.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jibran, you said something. Wait,
I said
you wanted me to say what?
Start back from ad hominem. That's where we kind of lost you.
Oh, okay. It's intended to sort of scotch this ad hominem argument where a person tries to dismiss an entire person's belief set or a specific chunk of the person's belief set simply by appeal to the kind of upbringing they had. You know, it is certainly true that people do have the beliefs that they do because of where they were and who they met and who they knew and what they read and what they thought, and yeah, sure, but that's true of everybody, and so as a sort of a blanket dismissal, it's worthless. And it's certainly a fallacy when you're addressing a specific individual, because that individual is right there in front of you, and they can give you their reasons. Now, if their reasons are, I believe because this is what I was taught, and then you could say, well, are there any other reasons, besides the fact that, and presumably they will give you those reasons. And that's what he talks about. He says, well, look, I didn't just have this stuff poured down my throat, so to speak. I also went to school, and I had friends, and I knew people who were outside my religion, and I went to university, and I learned all the standard objections and all the reasons why what I believe is false, according to other people, and yet I still believe. So all of that has to be addressed, imagine if someone were to say to an atheist, well, the reason you're an atheist is because you grew up in a godless household. Well, so much for your atheism. You just look at them like, well, what the hell? So he's right to make this objection. Everybody is right to make this objection when that argument is thrown at them. It's best not to throw that objection at anybody. It has nothing to do with the fact of the demographics. Yes, of course. To point out that people's beliefs are conditioned by where they grew up and who they knew is that's like saying you believe in evolution because you went to school and studied biology. That's not an objection. So you have to wait for the arguments and find out. Okay, well, is there anything to this education? Was there anything to what you were taught and what you learned? And so I thought he did a nice job of sort of just turning that around. He does it very, very quickly and gracefully, but he presents it as, well, if you say this, I can counter with this, and I can counter with this. Would that convince you? No. Well, there we go. Let's move on. And I think that's nice. I think that's how these arguments have to go. And go ahead, Jibran.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, yeah, I think we're both in agreement there. The one exception being that John was saying that he was, for example, raised in a household that does not fit his description at all. But no, for the most part, I agree with you I agree with you completely that dismissing someone's argument based on the fact that it was conditioned into them is utterly absurd. And I think he is right to address that. Some flaws in how he addresses it, as John said, it's a bit hyperbolic, but I think it does the job well enough. Ironically, though, I think his discussion of his schooling slightly undercut his point, because he talked about how he basically spent almost all of his time in these really Christian schools, surrounded by, like, with one exception though. He did say that he did 2 years of graduate study in philosophy, where he was out of a Christian school. Besides that, though, it kind of doesn't help his case, where he relates being told by teachers, none of these objections are valid, so you can just ignore them. Like, that actually hurts his case considerably, because, beyond that, though, I think it's good to deal with that objection.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot in this document about his kind of further years on in his schooling, and yeah, I mean, he does mention that he goes to university and he does hear all the standard objections from people who actually believe it, right? But when I looked into it, it looked like he went to he went to Princeton, right, for his philosophy training, and wasn't that a Calvinist seminary back when he went to it?
Yeah. He even alludes to the fact that it had the
right. Yeah,
a lot of the theology expunged from it. He sort of mentions Princeton and then says, well, this was before. This was in the good old days when it was overtly non-secular and Christian.
Okay, so I guess I was wrong. That doesn't help his case at all.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he pretty much just states right out that, I mean, he never received schooling from a place that did not agree with his theology to begin with. So there's sort of a sort of a weird undercutting there, anyways. But
well,
yeah.
no, it only undercuts it if you're trying to make the claim that in the course of his education he didn't actually hear the objections. I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
You know, of course he did.
But whether or not he heard the actual objections or straw man version of those objections is the question that I would ask. Having someone who actively thinks that something is false present to you that thing that they believe to be false, you're probably not going to get a particularly unbiased version of it. However, I would say that, to be fair to him, his point in some ways isn't undercut by this, because his point is that we all grow up in these biased environments, and so it is equally biased of us to grow up without any Christian schooling, is what he's saying, because you either are against Christianity or for Christianity, which is a dichotomy I find somewhat objectionable. But regardless, that kind of doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't hurt his point as much as I would have thought earlier.
Yeah, no, that's hitting the nail on the head there, Jibran. He would say, well, look, if you went to secular schools your whole life, you've never had, the case that I would have presented to you, or that someone from my side would have presented to you. So I think that's fine. We have to make sure we don't tread into the ad hominem by pointing out that he's never had the proper counter arguments. But I mean, if you went to an institution like Princeton, if you go to some place like a theological seminary, a place like Princeton, you can be sure you're going to get the proper arguments. This isn't Jerry Falwell's Liberty University or something like that. Some joke of a university when it comes to these kinds of questions. Right? This was serious. So I'm confident that he actually did hear the objections. I think what would have happened, though, is not that he didn't encounter the objections and didn't read the proper sources well articulated. It's that the argument that might be put is, well, how forcefully was this defended by anyone? How forcefully did the professor take it up, perhaps? But a good philosophy professor will do that. Will take up the position of the person who wrote the book or the article or whatever that the class is studying. I mean, I've done this. I mean, I did a little bit of teaching in philosophy, and when I'm presenting Anselm's ontological argument, I'm pretending I'm Anselm. I'm arguing, on all 8 cylinders on behalf of Anselm. It's a tough sell in the modern age to get people to think like someone from the 11th century, and to get them to understand that it doesn't matter that he was from the 11th century. You can't dismiss him on that basis. So he would have had that kind of high caliber education at an institution like that.
I agree with you to some extent, but the thing is that if you don't believe in it and you haven't been immersed in studying it your entire life, you're simply not going to be able to provide as good of a defense as someone that has, even if you're trying, even if, like, yeah,
that's true. But I mean, a qualified professor does this. That's what they do. The mark of a good professor of like, not in every field, it doesn't matter, but in every field, but like in the humanities, or philosophy in particular is what we're talking about. The mark of a good professor or a good instructor is someone who can present the position really convincingly, that gives you pause, right? So presumably he would have had that. I mean, we're speculating here, of course, but I mean, to suggest that, well, if they didn't believe it, how forcefully and sincerely could they put it forward?
Yeah,
and convincingly. I mean, that you would have the same problem in a secular school. How forcefully was Christianity presented in your humanities class, or your moral and social development class, or your religious ed class, or something like that?
Well, I agree.
Yeah, so that would be the sort of the counter argument to that.
No, and I would agree with that counter argument. The point I was trying to make was not that these people are bad professors, but that even a good professor that isn't really well acquainted with that particular is not going to be able to provide a particularly good defense of it. That's what I was talking about.
No, that's perfectly true. Yeah. I mean, if you've ever been to university and had the misfortune of being, in the class of someone whose biases are all too clear, and they have a hard time making a case for views that they don't agree with, it's very, very dissatisfying. It's a terrible way to learn. You find yourself having to argue on behalf of the material that you're reading against the professor. It's awful when that happens. It's a good exercise, but I mean, it's better if the professor helps you to understand the material rather than throws up obstacles to you appreciating what's been put before you.
Yeah, you would hope if they're a professor that they're a lot more familiar with it than the students would be, right? And yeah, at the very least, I suppose when you go to university, you're kind of expecting a certain amount of expertise to be transferred in the classes, right? So
at least an accredited one.
Well, in an accredited one, you would expect that. Accreditation isn't what it used to be, maybe.
They all say that. Yeah, do you want to say anything, John? We've been kind of dominating.
No problem, guys. I'm having a great time and really enjoying it.
This is your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm just looking at the time here, and I know we got a lot to go through. We've only covered really later schooling so far.
Okay, well, jump in with quotes or whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a couple analogies here that I really enjoy. I don't know if you guys noticed a lot. I mean, he's really good at building pretty good analogies, or at least pointing them out and building them into a story. But one of the ones that really caught me was what is it here? The Valley of the Blind. Which one is it here?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, a young man who was out hunting fell over a precipice into the Valley of the Blind. There was no escape. The blind men did not understand him when he spoke of seeing the sun and colors of the rainbow, but a fine young lady did understand him when he spoke the language of love. The father of the girl would not consent to the marriage of his daughter to a lunatic who spoke so often of things that did not exist. But the great psychologists of the Blind Men's University offered to cure him of his lunacy by sewing up his eyelids. Then they assured him he would be normal like everybody else. But the simple seer went on protesting that he did see the sun. That kind of caught me off guard for a second. It kind of makes sense until you think about it for about 5 minutes, and then it kind of falls apart. But
well, there's something I like about it. I mean, besides being beautifully evocative and sort of reminiscent of Plato's allegory of the cave, and it's one thing I like about it is it makes a point. That, well, it's something that we atheists tend to sort of sweep aside a little too easily. When a person says, look, I have a religious experience, I'm a person of faith, and they tell us, look, all you have to do is get on your knees, confess that you're a sinner, accept Christ as your personal Savior, and then you'll see. What they're suggesting is a sort of a different epistemological mode here. We normally think evidence first, belief next, okay? This is sort of a principle of good reasoning, right? I need the facts first, right? And what they're suggesting is, no, belief on the, or evidence on the installment plan. Believe first, and it is an effect of the belief, of that leap of faith, of that acceptance, that the evidence will come. It will be bestowed as a gift. There will be this self-authenticating testimony, some kind of inner experience that will be self-authenticating, self-attesting. It will seem undeniable to you. You will have the evidence that you're now asking me for, but I can't give it to you. It doesn't come from me. The evidence comes from above, but there's only one way to get there, and it's not by looking around or anything like that. And so that's sort of what this analogy is getting at. It's that kind of thing that, look, when you say, no, show me the evidence, look, my claim is precisely that the evidence is not to be given. The evidence is not like the evidence of material objects and stuff like that. The evidence comes through a different channel, and it comes under different conditions. And for you to simply insist, no, that's not good enough, is simply to insist on your conception and standard of evidence. And I'm asking you to be open-minded about this and think of yourself perhaps as one of the people in this sort of civilization of the blind, this valley of the blind, and that I am like someone, a sighted person, who has some capacity to understand a certain category of facts that you are in no epistemic position to judge. And of course, by your lights or closed eyes, it seems like I'm the crazy one. And what you're asking me to do is that I should sew my eyes shut and adopt your standard of evidence and sort of, live in the benighted condition that you're in. But I'm asking you to be sort of open-minded about this. That's sort of one of the things that this analogy does.
Yeah, it has the added benefit of also suggesting that atheists are lacking a sense perception that theists somewhat have. So there's a lot of positive spin you can get off that analogy.
Yeah,
Ron? Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting possibility that I think the analogy suggests is that theists have some mechanism, or as you said, some sense that we do not have access to. That we simply, it is as if we were born without eyes. We have no way of accessing this God or this experience that they do have access to. In that sense, we are the deformed ones. We're the ones that are lacking in this ability. And I think that in some cases we can't completely dismiss it. We can say that it is unlikely, and we can be doubtful of this possibility, but it is not something we can entirely dismiss.
Well, how would you say it's doubtful, though? On what basis would you be saying that it's doubtful without merely assuming your standard of evidence against theirs?
Well, yeah, I mean it's complicated. I would have to cite cases of people transitioning between being atheists and theists, and from theist to atheist. Either they would be losing or gaining this ability that, as I said, we would be innately born with or born without, and that would either suggest that these people were ignoring their sense that they had all along, or were making it up in their own mind.
Yeah, I think Van Til actually kind of expands on that a little bit. Even before he brings up that analogy, he states that everybody wears colored glasses, and he kind of leaves it at that until a little bit later, where he says that everybody's got colored glasses cemented on, like people who don't believe have colored glasses cemented on their face, and so they can't. They are seeing the wrong spectrum, right? And that's sort of his argument, that you have that sense, you're just seeing it wrong. So it would be like colored glasses instead of being blind, right? I think maybe the analogy of the valley of the blind is sort of like hyperbole, like some of this analogy is, right?
I would suggest that the valley of the blind, where some people do not have this sense, is a possibility as well. It may not be what he was trying to get at, but I think it's actually a much more intriguing possibility in some ways. Not necessarily a possibility I believe, but one that I find interesting to consider. And it would be a challenge to my atheism, because it would demonstrate that while there is a God, I simply am physically incapable of experiencing it. I think that's an interesting possibility, not, as I said, a likely one.
If I could interject here with sort of the Reformed view on this, it's not just the Reformed view either. A lot of Christians view it this way. Sort of the valley of the blind kind of oversells it, because we're sort of imagining a population of people who are all congenitally blind and cannot see. No matter what they do, they're not going to be able to see. But let's imagine that this is a valley of the blindfolded. And you're in there trying to get people. You just need to try to take off the blindfold. No. We have all kinds of fine reasons why we must never take off our blindfolds. And so everyone's walking around with a kind of self-imposed blindness. This is how a lot of Christians see this, and certainly people within the Reformed Calvinistic tradition absolutely see it this way. What they see is that. Their view is that there's a sensus divinitatis, that there's a sense of like a sixth sense, like a sense of balance or proprioception or something like that. There's a capacity within us to apprehend and understand God, and there's all kinds of indicators, there as they see it. There's all of creation and all of the sort of the beauty of the world, the order of the world. In modern parlance, all the specified complexity of the world and stuff like that. All of this is evidence prima facie of design, and hence a designer. They would see it that they would say something like, you have the concept of right and wrong in you that's hard to anchor in anything, just that very concept of right and wrong. And then, of course, you have a conscience. There's, you feel bad when you're entertaining a course of action that you yourself judge to be wrong, even if you might change your mind later about it being wrong. While you're thinking that it's wrong, when you're entertaining a course of action that you yourself feel is wrong, you feel bad about it. You feel guilty. You have a conscience, even if your conscience is not properly calibrated, you have a conscience. And this is sort of something other animals don't have. This is something put in you that points to God. There are other things, but this is the kind of thing that they're talking about, and that at some point, you can cultivate this or improve or fine-tune this sort of sense of the divine. Your understanding, your apprehension of God, your vision. You can imagine it's like wearing multiple blindfolds. Okay, they're all translucent. You got enough of them, you can't see a thing, but you can sort of peel them off one by one, and slowly you can improve and see and apprehend the divine nature and your place in the world, and this idea. The idea is that we're blinded by sin. Right? The blindfolds, the multiple layers of blindfolds, are our original sin and our own sins. And when you sort of take this leap of faith, accept Christ as your Savior, there is a process of what they call regeneration. Your spirit gets regenerated, and you come to be able to see rightly, to think rightly, to reason rightly, not just morally, but in general, so that you can see things for what they are. Despite what you've been told. That's sort of how they see it. So maybe the valley of the blind is maybe it's the valley of the people wearing many, many, many blindfolds who refuse to take them off. Maybe that would help sort of understand what he's getting at there.
No, I recognize that. I was just suggesting that there's this other possibility that not necessarily that people believe this possibility, but that it is an interesting possibility, and I think one we must consider. I understand that isn't what people believe, or for the most part believe, but I was just advancing the hypothetical.
Cool. I agree. It is an intriguing idea that there may be a sense that we're missing or whatever, and it's intriguing because we would be able to test for it, right? I mean, I think that's what makes it the most interesting idea.
Well, how would you test for it?
I would say we wouldn't be able to. I mean, unless it depends on whether or not it's like a physical organ that is malformed in some of us or not formed at all. I mean, it could even be part of an organ that we've already identified a purpose for, and that we simply cannot identify the bit that is malformed. Imagine like it's part of our physical heart that in some people is malformed and in others is well formed. But we would never identify the heart as being damaged because this part of it was lacking. So I would say that we couldn't test for it, and that's actually in some ways what makes it kind of intriguing, or potentially not test for it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I like that analogy. Jibran,
yeah.
could I pick up on something you said earlier about? Oh dear, I don't know if I can remember it now. Geez, just as I was saying it, just fled from my thoughts.
I hate that.
That's awful. Okay, well, let's press on. I'm sorry.
Cool, no problem.
But do come back to that if you remember.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. I was gonna go into. I kind of had a question about God being described as the all-conditioner. Did you? I mean, I know that's probably comes from somewhere else in the theology, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So is that a common thing within Calvinist theology, or have you guys heard about that, or?
No, I'll confess I don't know that expression. I mean, I know it sort of when we talk about something being conditioned, he's sort of imagining that everything depends on God, everything rests on God. God is the cause of all causes. Everything that makes sense because of God. I think he's alluding to that, but I mean, I confess I'm not clear what he's getting at with that exactly. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Calvinist theology, so I'm lost as well.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have a Calvinist with us right now. I'm sure there's probably a few watching. The word presuppositionalism usually grabs a few people. But.
Well, if anyone's watching,
yeah,
who knows exactly what expression's supposed to mean, just maybe put it in the comments, and maybe someone. I'm not looking at comments, but maybe
I'm tracking them right
looking,
now. So if they come up, I'll see them. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he describes it as.
Okay. I would track them, but I can't multitask.
No problem. I'm having trouble myself here. he says, it was he who conditioned all that conditioned me in my early life, but then it was he who conditioned everything that conditioned you in your early life. So the God of Christianity is the all-conditioner. As the all-conditioner, God is the all-conscious one, and that he leaves that as a period there. Now I'm not 100% certain what he means by all-conditioner or all. I mean, as all-conditioner, I kind of get that he's saying he set up all the conditions that make you, or me, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alternatively, it may mean, given that he's a Calvinist, it seems more likely that he set up the conditions, but it is also possible to read that as meaning that God is constantly responsible for them, that he's responsible for continuing the laws of nature. He's responsible for enforcing them, not just creating them. But I don't think that that's the correct interpretation based on his theology. However, I would say that all-conscious one probably refers to God's omniscience, in his view.
Well, maybe I'll just go on here. Maybe there's a little bit of context here. So,
hang on, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm starting to remember what I was trying to say.
Sure, bring it up, please.
But Jibran, if you could help me with this. You were talking about how you would sort of rebut a certain claim or address a certain claim. In terms of you would look at how people who were theists who turned into atheists and vice versa.
Yes,
could you just repeat the point you were making? Because I know that what I was going to say was right on that. And
sure. So what I said is that I would rebut the idea that, or I would say that the fact that atheists can turn to theists and theists can turn to atheists is at least evidence for the idea that atheists and theists are different because they have some sort of sensor that the atheist can sense God and the atheist cannot. It is a physical sensor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember now what the point was, if I may.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it was in connection with this this idea that not that there's a sensor or a detector within you, nothing like the sensus divinitatis or anything like that, but that it was in connection with this idea of you believe first, the evidence comes later. And the evidence comes in the form of, the conclusive evidence comes in the form of sort of an inner experience that is self-authenticating and self-attesting and undeniable. If that were true, well, of course, you couldn't argue people out of this view. It would seem to me, it should be almost impossible to argue them out of this view. But so you're right on point, I think. There's something fishy here. If the fact that there are theists who become atheists and then they redescribe what they were experiencing and say, upon reflection, I realized this, feeling that I had inside me, what I thought was a self-attesting, self-authenticating experience, proof God, I realize now was something else. That is really prima facie very strong evidence against anyone who claims that there is genuinely such an experience. Similarly, the fact that people of make similar claims. This is what I wanted to add. The fact that people of faiths make similar sorts of claims for their gods and their theological concepts, I think is sort of another good way to sort of counter that argument.
You're breaking up again a little bit, Ozzy. You might want to turn the bandwidth down a tiny bit. However, a counterpoint to what I just said, unfortunately, and what you just said is they were never true Christians to begin with, which is to say that they were truly imagining these experiences, but real Christians actually have them. And you really, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to argue with that. It's a ridiculous statement in some sense, but if it is true, then you're kind of The rebuttal.
Yeah. But I think that really is not a very. Yeah, I really don't think that's a very good rebuttal. That rebuttal is exactly what you would predict. What's that?
Well, it's not convincing to us, but the point is it's convincing to them, and that's what protects them from that claim. It isn't at all convincing to me or you, but it may be convincing to someone that does believe this.
Right. No, but the problem is that when you consider that there are people of other faiths who make the same claim, right? You have to say, well, look, I don't have. It doesn't have to be convincing to you. It has to be convincing to me. So maybe it's not convincing to you, the believer. Maybe you're convinced that all those people who used to be Christians or merely claim to be Christians by your lights, never really had the experience. I, as a non-believer, am left with this choice to make. Well, I have this evidence, and I have to take this. This is evidence I can take at face value. I can take your claim at face value that you have this experience. But another claim I have to take at face value is one that mitigates against your claim, which is that people say who've made the same claim will tell me, no, I was mistaken about this. You yourself, who are making this claim now, could change your mind tomorrow from where I sit, and your insistence that you could never change your mind is not a piece of evidence. It is not something you can demonstrate, right? And the fact that there are people of other faiths doing it, so making the same claim suggests that this is a claim that is all too easy to make, and it is, of course, an instance of the no true Scotsman fallacy. You've made this hypothesis one that it's impossible for me to evaluate. You described it in such a way that there's no way for me to evaluate this in your favor. I just have to look and say, well, you say you have this experience you could never doubt. This person tells me he used to have this experience, and now months later he tells me, yeah, no, I was wrong. I wasn't bullshitting when I said that. Sorry for the language, but I mean I wasn't just BSing when I said this. I was just really confused and mistaken, and I sincerely believed it when I said it. But in hindsight, I realized I was simply misdescribing my own experiences, and I was construing things that were happening to me in light of what my theology dictated I should be experiencing. And from the outside, I mean, I have to take both those claims very seriously, and one completely undermines the other. So I find myself with, and since I haven't had the experience, of course, that's what tips the scale in favor of one over the other. I can't be sort of stuck in a position of indecision here. I can actually look at this and go, well, it doesn't square with my experience. If it happened to me, well, then I would know, but it hasn't.
They've essentially made the claim unfalsifiable because they've said that anyone that does have this or claims to have this experience and then later says they didn't actually have it in the first place, and anyone that claims to have it and continues that claim did really have it. So, yeah, I agree. It's impossible to evaluate. It's essentially meaningless, or at least meaningless to us from the point of evaluating it. But unfortunately, I mean, that doesn't mean it's not true. It means it's a position that is of no predictive value at all, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's false.
Yeah, well, it has no probative value, even for them, when they hear it coming out of the mouths of people of another faith.
Sure.
Right, and the fact that it doesn't convince them, right, isn't it doesn't convince them when they're hearing it coming out of the mouths of people of another faith, and they might try to say, well, look, okay, yes, but when I have this experience, my experience is that it's of a monotheistic God who is the only God. But now you're really availing yourself of your theology here. I mean, do people really have an experience that there is a monotheistic God and that such a God is the only God? Is that the experience you're having? There's that much propositional content built into this experience? I mean, you're building into the experience now. You're defining into the experience so much of your theology. This is no longer an experience that you're having. I don't know what to call it. You're having a theology. You're having a theological moment.
That's interesting.
My point, though, is that even if it is unconvincing, it doesn't actually mean it's necessarily wrong. It is hypothetically possible that one could do it. That's all I was saying. Yeah. It's not a convincing claim. It is unfalsifiable. I see it as useless, but that does not make it false necessarily. And a true believer is going to latch onto that. I mean, that's unfortunately probably what's going to happen. Do you, I think we may have lost Ozzy.
Ozzy, you still there? Oh, looks like he's still active.
Okay. You wanna say something, John?
I'm pretty interested in that conversation, but maybe we should move on here just in an effort to keep it rolling along. I mean, there is so much to go through in that one analogy. It's really amazing when you think about it. But yeah, I mean, it kind of speaks to I think the impact that this pamphlet had, right? There's a lot of great metaphors and analogies that he uses that seem to really emphasize his point, anyways, and I think he does a good job of it. I was curious to move on to what is it here? Kind of along the same lines, he's got another analogy of an immigrant of a miracle. He kind of goes into the idea that miracles being unique makes them untestable, right? And so it's sort of along the same lines as you guys were talking here. That when something is if miracles, what does he say? If miracles want have scientific standing, they have to sue for admittance at the port of the mainland to scientific endeavor, and that in order to be given admission, they must go through the process of generalization, which deprives them of their uniqueness. And so it's a really interesting idea of miracles trying to immigrate into scientific land. So I don't know if did you guys read anything into that, or do you recall that, Ozzy, when you read through?
Yeah, that was my favorite metaphor.
And it's sort of, yeah, I mean, it kind of cuts into what you guys were talking about there, with things being untestable. I mean, he does bring up the point that, I mean, miracles kind of do have this inherent uniqueness that kind of makes them inaccessible to scientific testing. So there's no repeatability in them, and thus they kind of have to wait forever at the port. I think he explains that it's like just like dead letters. He's going to wait until they're, the letters are not in the right language, and so the postmaster's just going to put them in the dead letter office and say, until they're addressed in the King's English and to the proper address, I can't deliver them, right? So,
Right.
They're going to stay there forever. They're never going to move anywhere, right? But, he's got an excuse for why they can't be delivered.
Yeah, this goes to the issue of what he sees as an intellectual prejudice against his view. His idea is, well, look, you have these standards of evidence. They're perfectly good standards of evidence. We all apply these standards of evidence in science and in daily life, except that I'm trying to make a claim here about a certain kind of phenomenon, which, in the nature of the case, by its very nature, is not amenable to that kind of hypothesis testing and evidence gathering. It's in the nature of this case that you're not going to find the kind of evidence that you are insisting is the only thing that counts as evidence. And so for you to simply keep throwing in my face that I can't prove a miracle is, of course, simply insisting on your standard of evidence. So what he's trying to do here is not say that you're unwilling to grant that there are miracles. He's saying you're unable, not unwilling, you're unable, by virtue of what you believe evidence to be, to see a miracle if it happened right in front of you. These letters are undeliverable. It's like someone who's, an immigrant sort of stuck in port and can't go anywhere. Because there's this procedure that you put in front of them that won't let them in. You're not letting into your country something that is real. You're simply not acknowledging it. And this is actually not a terrible argument. It seems, I mean, we're all desperate to say, oh, this is a terrible argument. I mean, this is just special pleading. Well, yeah, it's special pleading if it's BS. But what if think seriously now? What if there were miracles and they were not replicable, they were not repeatable, we would not be able to identify them? Okay, so well, then you might say, okay, well then we couldn't identify them. Then we have no reason to believe them. Yes, okay, but that doesn't mean that they don't happen and they're not real. And so what he's suggesting is, look, the reason you just got to make sure that you're honest about why you say there are no miracles, and it can't just be that I'm sticking to this particular standard of evidence. If that's the only reason, you got to ask yourself, what's that standard what's supporting that standard of evidence? why are you heeding to that standard of evidence? I mean, it could be just that it's convenient and gets you out of having to believe certain things that would be very consequential for how you live your life.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But I'd like to say, though, I think there's maybe one criteria where methodological naturalism could lead you to concluding a miracle did occur, and that is if you had a complete understanding of the laws of physics. And every observation up until that point conformed perfectly with these observations, and every observation past this point does. And there's no way you can tweak them subtly to allow for this particular event. If there is no logically self-consistent set of laws that allow every event that you've seen previously to fit into the same universe with that miracle, then you could prove that it was a miracle. You could prove that it occurred outside of the laws of nature, because it couldn't occur within any self-consistent laws of nature. You could either prove that it's a miracle or that the laws of nature are not self-consistent.
Well, one alternative, though, is, of course, that maybe the laws of nature are not self-consistent.
I agree. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's a possibility. I mean, it's as sort of puzzling as that is. That even that is a bare possibility, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. It wouldn't prove that it wouldn't prove that it was the work of a particular god or anything, but it would prove that it was not natural. It was supernatural. It was outside the laws of nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that is absolutely the other possibility that you could come to the conclusion of. Yeah, I don't think there would be any way to prove that it was from a god unless God was part of the universe and therefore subject to the laws of nature.
There's something I'd like to say to this question about, how would you know that, something was authored by God, some miracle was authored by God. This is something that I have always struggled with. It's something I struggled with when I was a Christian myself, and that is, it would be so easy for God to author his miracles, to make it plain. First of all, he could make himself known to everybody objectively. There would be no need for the self-authenticating experience. God could, literally imbue everyone with an experience. I mean, everyone right now in the world could have an experience where they hear, I am the God of Abraham, I am that I am. He could just trot out whatever he wanted, and we could all hear this voice simultaneously, and we would all turn to one another and go, oh my God, what the heck was that? People who were asleep would wake up and say, I just had the most vivid, amazing dream. It was a dream unlike any I've ever had, and it said this, and then we would all take notice. We would all, people would convert in the billions, if at least. This would be absolutely irrefutable. I mean, it would be in every newspaper. People could talk about nothing else if this kind of experience were to happen. That would be one sort of trivial way that God could sort of make his own existence known. But as for a specific miracle, there's all kinds of ways that a being could author an action so that it was unmistakably the work of that being. So this is why it sounds to our mind like special pleading when they say, well, you've got the standard of evidence that's sort of blocking everything. One has to wonder, well, yeah, but okay, given that that's the case, why can't God just sort of get rid of this obstacle? I mean, he could do so effortlessly. He's omnipotent. Presumably, this is not beyond his power. And so the story that they give, that it's just a prejudice on our parts, is exactly what you would expect if there was no such being and they were just mistaking events that are non-miraculous for the miraculous, or just believing things that never happened to have happened and to have happened by miraculous means.
To come to the theist's defense, because there isn't a theist here to defend their belief, to come to their defense, I'd like to say that the standard theological argument that if God were to interfere directly, he would violate our free will and therefore our ability to choose whether or not to be good or evil.
You know that's a terrible argument, and I bet you know why.
Well, I mean, I have some reasons. I don't believe in free will. I don't think it's a coherent concept.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, there was.
for the sake of argument, let's assume there's a coherent concept of free will. Well, there are a couple of holes in it that I can see. One is that that by creating the church at all, he's interfering with our free will, arguably. But their point would be that it is not about not interfering at all, but interfering in an incontrovertible way, that we would have no choice but to accept God. But then they then turn around and argue that they've had an experience which is incontrovertibly the work of God to justify their own belief. And so it is clearly God does not count if a person has a free will. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another argument. Okay, so that last point you made, I think, is spot on. If God does more with your free will, then He would never give anyone a self-authenticating, self-attesting experience that they could not deny, because that it beyond your human ability, according to that, to deny this, and so you have a belief that has effectively been put there, robbing you of free will in that instance. Well, make up your mind. Is this allowed or not? Can God do this or not? Would He not do this, or not? So this is really trying to have it both ways. And another argument, I think, is that it is not a violation of one's free will, if free will exists, to have one's beliefs caused. When I look at this, glass of beer here, and I have this mental experience, a visual experience of a glass of beer here, and a tactile experience, and I form the belief that there's a glass of beer here, there's no way that I feel that my free will has been compromised, right? Having good reasons for believing something doesn't take away your free will, period, right? If free will exists, if the kind of radical free will that they think does exist, then surely having good reasons isn't compromising your free will. I think that's just a terrible argument. On top of that, your argument is excellent, that this self-attesting experience that is undeniably an experience of God would have to qualify as a violation of free will. So I think that they're really trying to have it both ways with that argument.
But in response to what you said, I think I may have forgotten what my response was. I think we're all kind of having that kind of night. Oh no, this is unfortunate.
You made two claims. There was that last one, and the one before was.
Well, I was responding to what you were saying. It was okay. So it's a violation of our free will, not because he's making us believe in something, but because he's making us believe in something that we know. If we know that God exists and we know He has all these traits, that we would never be compelled to do evil under any circumstances. And I think that that's a great reason for God, if He exists, to reveal Himself to us. Why would God want us to do evil, or to have the option of doing evil? I mean, I think that is where it really fails, is when it comes to why would God care if we do evil? And if He does care, why doesn't He just make us incapable of being evil? That's, I think, where it really falls apart. But I think they have a point there, that if we had all incontrovertible evidence that there was an all-powerful being that would torture us forever and ever and ever, if we sinned, then it would be it would kind of be hard to justify sinning. Like, well, I could eat this food on the wrong day and be satisfied for a day and then be tortured forever, or I could just not and go to heaven. I mean, I kind of see their point there, that is what really takes the free will away.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work, because first of all, they believe that even when you have a regenerated spirit, or it's never fully regenerated, but when you have this experience of God, they don't think for a moment that you cease to be a sinner. You're not sin-free from that moment. Obviously, God can reveal Himself to some people according to their theology, according to Van Til's own theology, that God can reveal Himself to you, and you can have this sort of this certitude because of the self-attesting, self-authenticating sort of inner testimony of the Holy Spirit, and nevertheless, you still have free will. You can still sin. So, I mean, obviously, they believe in free will so drastically that obviously, even having this experience does not make it impossible for you to be a sinner. So you still have free will. It doesn't compromise your free will. So it seems to me, God could do that to everybody if He wanted to, right? Now, they have another theological reason why it doesn't happen to everybody, but I don't think it's a very good reason. But that's another argument.
I got to say, though, in response to that, I think that is a flaw of their argument, to say that once, I mean, either they have to argue that Christians who've had God revealed to them, certainly, with certainty are irrational and make the utterly irrational decision to sin even though they know it will result in eternal torture, either they have to argue that Christians are irrational or that this wouldn't rob you of your free will. And I would actually say that for a rational person, it in a sense would rob them of they would have no compulsion to do evil because the punishment is clearly so great, if they're truly certain of it. That, or they have to argue that the Christians who had this revealed to them aren't certain of it.
Well, I think they would just say, look, if you had this evidence that God existed and you understood the stakes, the likelihood that you would do wrong would be very, very small. You would be as likely to do wrong under the surveillance of this God as you would be to commit a crime right in front of a policeman. And yet people do that.
An omnipotent policeman, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, people do commit crimes right in front of the police. They do commit crimes on camera.
Sure, but
maskless. They smile at the camera, knowing that this is very likely going to get them caught. It's just they think that they won't get caught. So remember, all they have to do is God just has to rob them of the free will, allegedly, by imposing His existence on them, so that they couldn't deny His existence. But that wouldn't mean that they have to believe every part of the dogma about hell and the inevitability and all this. And even if they did, it doesn't follow from that they would be sufficiently rational. I mean, we don't practice sort of perfect deductive closure. That is, we don't work out all of the deductive consequences.
Oh, we lost you again, Ozzy.
And implications of it.
You're fading
those
out. All consequences
into
is what we lost
perfectly
you.
Rational. Having this experience would not confer rationality.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that they'd have to be very rational, but I think the difference between saying people will commit a crime in front of a police officer or a camera is that even if they think there's a good chance of them getting caught, the punishment is going to be likely relatively mild. I mean, what's 17 years in prison versus an eternity in hell? I mean, those are very different stakes we're playing with. And if someone genuinely believes that those are the stakes, and that there's no way that they could possibly get away with any sort of sin, then I would bet that person, if they were rational, mind you, I'm saying if they're rational, would do everything in their power to avoid sinning. And in that sense, it would rob a rational person.
Yes, absolutely.
But it would not necessarily rob the irrational their ability to sin.
Yeah, but this has a weird implication. The implication is paradoxically that Christians who sin as much as an atheist are more irrational than an atheist, because an atheist doesn't have the added incentives to not sin and do these things. So by definition, if a person has this conclusive evidence that God exists and understands what the consequences are and their inevitability, but they have this escape clause, you see, and the escape clause is they're saved. So it doesn't really matter how much sinning they do. It really doesn't matter. It literally does not matter how much sinning you have done. And they don't construe this as a license to sin, of course. But the problem is, they can sin as much as they like, and they're still going to get out of it. So, and it's very possible that understanding makes a difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. That does disrupt it. That does disrupt my claim that it would rob them of their free will. But again, then that disrupts their claim that it would rob everyone else of their free will. So
right, exactly. This really is an argument trying to have it both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, you're probably eager to move on to another point.
Yeah, it was definitely, but no, that was a great clarification, guys. I really appreciate that. I'm gonna be listening to this over and over again. I know it. I was curious. Maybe this is kind of going along with your guys' point here. Maybe I'll just read out this quote and see if I get your guys' response to it. You have taken for granted that you need no emplacement of any sort outside of yourself. You have assumed the autonomy of your own experience. Consequently, you are unable, and that is, unwilling, to accept as fact any fact that would challenge your self-sufficiency. You are bound to call that contradictory that which does not fit within the reach of your intellectual powers.
Yeah, I actually think this is a good point.
So do I.
People will often dismiss things that they don't understand, and that is not legitimate. If you were to claim that something is inconsistent, if you were to claim something is incoherent, you have to demonstrate that. I mean, this is why I want to go to college and try to pursue a degree in philosophy, so that I can demonstrate to my satisfaction that objective morality as a concept is incoherent. I mean, I hold that view, but I can't defend it. I want to be able to defend my views, and as such, I think I agree with him that essentially that yes, people do this.
There's a theological point that he's making here. It's just this idea of the autonomy of human reason, and it connects back to this idea of regeneration that I was talking about earlier. One of the things that Calvinists and Reformed Christians believe, not just them, not just those denominations, but is the idea that because of sin, our very ability to reason and evaluate and make judgments and make the right judgments is compromised. It's like we're wearing, you know those glasses. There's some novelty glasses that have these weird prism lenses, and you can turn them, and the whole world goes cockeyed. So you're walking straight, but the whole world looks like it's twisted 45 degrees or something like that. It's like we're walking around with those, and or it's like taking off the blindfolds again, right? And as you become a Christian and you grow in your faith, and the Spirit works in you, and your soul is, or your spirit is regenerated, what ends up happening is you begin to think properly. You're able to see things as they are and reason properly about things, and it's like those lenses start to turn until finally you're literally seeing straight. And one of the things that they think seeing straight means is having all of your reason subordinate to the will of God and the authority of Scripture. So they will say, well, look, part of the problem you have here is you believe in the autonomy of your own reason. You think that the highest authority is your own reasoning ability. But your own reasoning ability has been messed up. It's just malfunctioning, and you don't know that it's malfunctioning. And because you're using your reasoning, you can't even detect that using a malfunctioning device to typically the device is functioning. This is hopeless as they see it, and it's only through this process of spiritual regeneration of your soul and your mind and your emotions that things get properly calibrated, and then you can see that what you needed to do all along was believe in God, believe in Christianity, trust in the authority of Scripture, and once you see that's the case, then you'll see that evolution is obviously wrong because it contradicts Scripture. Things like that, right? I want to punctuate with that kind of point because that's one of the things that's one of the ways that they'll sort of argue against certain things, or they'll just say, well, look, that's just not in the good book, and we'll say, well, who cares if it's not in the good book? Use your head, and their view is, well, no, your head is what's messed up. It's precisely the wrong instrument. You should never just use your head. Your head has to be finely tuned, and it's not finely tuned until you're right with God.
So to actually make that analogy maybe a bit stronger, this is something that my physics teacher told me, and I trust her because she's not really one to spread BS, but from what she's told me, that if you wear those glasses that turn the world upside down long enough, you actually adjust to it, and your mind flips the image. So you actually see everything as if it were right side up. And so
I did the experiment. When I was before I went to university, I went to school in Quebec, so I was in Cégep, and there was a psychology lab. I was a psychology student, an aspiring psychology student, and there was a psychology lab, and I actually got a job working as a lab monitor. And they had these glasses, just drawers and drawers of these glasses, and they were just wire frames, and they had these little lenses, and then you could orient them. They had little degrees marked on them, and you could walk around for like a day wearing glasses that were off by 60 degrees, and you would literally at first you'd be walking tipped over like this, but within a few hours your brain did something and started compensating, and by the end of the day you were just about fine. Every once in a while you'd mess up, and there was so your brain really did actually calibrate. And another interesting byproduct of that was that when you would take them off, everything would go wonky.
Exactly.
But you would revert to sort of normal perception very, very quickly. And when you put the glasses on, it was like wonky. But the more often you did this exercise, the faster your recovery and recalibration time got with these glasses. It was really cool.
So yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. That essentially they're going to think that you've gotten so used to this skewed view that you now think it's right, and when you take this view off, you're immediately going to be like, "Whoa, this is all wrong." But in reality, you just haven't adjusted yet.
That's right. That is how they would say. That's an excellent analogy.
Cool.
Well, it's your analogy.
Well, it's my analogy, but I mean, you're the one that drove home the point about the implications of it. That it seems normal to you, even though you're wearing skewed glasses, you can't see, that something's wrong.
Yeah. What's the word for that? Is it neural plasticity? That we can reprogram sections of our brain, or?
Well, there's no reprogramming going on there.
Right.
Yeah, neuroplasticity refers to the fact that your brain can literally rewire itself. There's no rewiring going on here. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Yeah, it's kind of virtual neural plasticity. Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's interesting. I always enjoy those kind of case studies and stuff. Reading about those, that's really interesting. Well, maybe we'll go on a little bit to maybe why Van Til thinks that our vision is skewed here. I think it's probably best put in this paragraph here. Now, if you are actually God's creature, then your present attitude to him is very unfair. In that case, it is even an insult to him. You have insulted God, and his displeasure rests upon you. You and God are not on speaking terms. You have very good reason for trying to prove that he doesn't exist. If he does exist, he will punish you for your disregard of him. You are therefore wearing colored glasses, and this determines everything you say about the facts and reasons you have for not believing in him. You have your picnics and hunting parties there being, I guess, his land, without asking his permission. You have taken the grapes of God's vineyard without paying him rent, and have insulted his representatives who have asked you for it. So that I think that's very telling. That he kind of thinks that it's almost an internal, like we're unconsciously suppressing the knowledge of God, right? And I think that is very much the claim there, right? That we're worried about the punishment, and therefore we're not even acknowledging the fact that we know that's how worried we are about the punishment.
Yeah, I guess I think the problem with that analogy is that we don't escape our fear of getting caught by the police when we're doing a crime by not believing in the police. What we do is we believe that we can't be caught by the police. We believe that we are immune to their effects. And as such, it would make more sense if someone believed in a sort of neutered God. They were convinced, if they believed in like Zeus and thought that they were good enough to avoid Zeus or something like that, that would make more sense. But in the case of Yahweh, Jehovah, I don't really think you can say that. If you genuinely believe in the theology, then you believe that he's omnipotent and omniscient, and he will know and be able to punish anything you do. So I kind of think the analogy breaks down a bit there, but it is a good analogy, and like all of his in this paper, I think it's well done.
Yeah, definitely. I had the same kind of initial reaction to it, where I thought that it wouldn't really work on someone who was a deist or any sort of other type of theist. It was very specific to argue against an atheistic point of view.
Well, couldn't he run the same argument against a deist or somebody else? He would just say, look, you're acknowledging that there's a God and all that, but you're sort of ignoring the relevant attributes of this God. But I mean, what he's getting at there is when he talks about you're hunting on his property, basically. I can't remember how he puts it exactly.
Stealing grapes, he uses, or picnics and hunting parties.
Yeah, what he's saying there is, look, you're at odds with yourself. You don't realize whose property you're on when you're doing this. You don't realize that when you're aiming guns at God and marshaling arguments against the existence of God, that you're presupposing God. Now, this goes back to the very first thing that Jibran said, which is this is the part of the argument that's left out, that he hasn't made that case. And it would be useful if he had. I mean, he does make that case in other works. Other presuppositionalists do that. It's unfortunate that it's not here, but his purpose in this paper is not to make that case. It's sort of to sort of, I think, scotch certain objections and get a non-believer to understand how this particular believer sees things. You know, he wants the person to understand. He wants the non-believer to understand. Look, this is how it looks to me. You look to me like someone who's using a mounted piece of firepower here, a machine gun or something like that, that's mounted to shoot at the thing, what he calls the emplacement, the thing that it's placed on, not realizing how contradictory and it sort of rationally incontinent this is. That's what he's getting at there. That everything you're doing, all of this objecting, all of this argumentation that you're throwing up in my face, is, from my standpoint, further evidence that you believe in a God, that this is all presupposed by a God, and that you're hiding something, you're denying something to yourself, and you're just denying it out loud to me, but really there's something wrong going on in you, that this is all really just an act of rebellion. You're being petulant, is what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to recognize the amazing phrase you used there, rationally incontinent. I've never heard that before, and I love it. But I actually think his argument is much stronger against a deist, because he's saying you recognize the existence of God, but you deny the fact that he can punish you for things. And so I think his argument actually works much better against a deist than it would against an atheist.
Yeah, I stand corrected on that. Actually, that's a good point.
In fact, I think that this part, and in fact, the entire paper, really, we say that it should be read by presuppositionalists, and I agree with you. But I think it should actually be read by atheists, because it's a great way of getting to know the presuppositionalist argument. I don't think we would have gotten into the discussion we got into with Redline, although that discussion was very interesting in its own right. But we wouldn't have gotten into that discussion if more people had read this, because it does introduce the basic idea in a way that's not like Tsai's style of argumentation. I think it's a really good way of introducing the idea, and it's elegantly done, and it's polite and interesting.
Very much so. There's a lot of kind of flattery in this one, almost like blackmail flattery. I know you're basically interested in this, and as an intelligent person, you're going to want to listen to this next part and stuff like. He throws a lot of that in there, and it's very much so a very, I don't know, a constructive way of approaching a dialogue. If you were if you were in fact doing a monologue to somebody like this, I think there's a lot of things you could take from this as ways to get people to listen to you and to allow you to speak and stuff like that.
It also mirrors the Socratic dialogue in that sense, where Socrates, or Plato through Socrates, always refers to his opponents as "you best of men" or "you who is more knowledgeable," right before he rips them to pieces. So I think that this is. Reading this is a lot like reading a sort of more modern. It is like reading a Socratic dialogue. Some of the language he uses is similar, and the basic style is. And I like that. I love reading Plato. I think he's a lot of fun to read, and I really enjoy that style. And so that does, yeah, it's a little bit oddly executed with the second person pronoun there of you, but
yeah,
I like the basic style a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, for an atheist who has probably raised these sorts of objections, it's kind of nice to sort of read someone raising them for you, and then sort of saying, "This is how I see it." And there's one thing I should say to underscore what you said about it'd be a good thing for atheists to read this. I mean, not just this. There's all kinds of stuff, by presuppositionalists out there that you can read. There's a difficulty with reading this stuff, though, and that is, from the standpoint of an atheist, it sounds so damn smug and sanctimonious But of course it's going to sound that way. That's how we sound to everybody on the other side of the fence. So, you just sort of have to be, thick-skinned, and if your blood pressure starts to go up when you're reading this stuff, you really need to sort of get yourself under control. That shouldn't happen. You shouldn't let that happen to you. But I mean, it's sort of a natural response when you read an argument that strikes you as, bonkers. But there's another thing that is important about this particular piece, and that is that he isn't really. He's describing how he sees things. He's not arguing for them. This is not a sort of a set of arguments that are going to show you that God exists. It's not at all what's going on. It's, listen, this is how I see things. This is how I see your questions. This is how I read your objections, right? And then you will understand why I find them unpersuasive. Then you will understand why I respond the way I do to your arguments. Okay, that's what he's trying to do. It's like he's trying to get you to understand how he understands your objections and your words. And he's not bothering to present all of the arguments in this little article. All he's trying to do is say, look, I think it's like this. That's what he's doing. And then you go, oh, I see. You see it that way. Okay, well, no longer seems you don't seem so insane to me now. I can see you're not crazy. Okay, I still don't agree with you. Well, that's okay. You don't have to agree with them, But you can at least understand. You can see the sense in how they respond to what you say. Because so much of the difficulty with presuppositionalism is that, atheists just think this argument seems crazy, and when I say something, what they come back with sounds even crazier. But there is a sense to be had here, and it sort of as a matter of intellectual charity, it's important to try to understand what the other person is saying from as they see it. You got to try to see it by their lights, at least for the purposes of argument. And if you're going to try to argue again, at least get their argument right. So this is sort of a good intro.
Absolutely. I think. Oh, never mind. I forgot what I was going to say. Go on, someone else.
No, I really love this. I really love this whole pamphlet. It really systematically lays out a lot of the objections that a theist is going to bring up in the argument. And it really made me think about some things that I had never really thought about before in the presup. So there was a bit a bit of the background to presuppositional apologetics that I really had I had no idea about, and it really brought me up to speed in a fast way. He's very effective in that sense.
I remember what I was going to say. This is going back a bit. To some extent, he kind of sets up you, the character of you, the atheist, as being kind of this sort of elitist person. He describes them as being under the shadow of the White House and growing up with silver shoes and all these things. And I
read in the Library of Congress and all that stuff,
Yeah, and I think this reflects to some extent how some atheists come across, and I think this is one of the really valuable things that he says here that I unequivocally agree with, along with the fact that being an atheist doesn't make us less biased, or it doesn't make us unbiased. I mean, regardless, it has nothing to do with our biases. It is our conclusion. So along with that, I think one of the interesting things that this character kind of reveals about how he sees us is, or how he saw the atheists back then, is being kind of smug and elitist in their own way, whereas we see religious people as being with this holier than thou attitude, and it's quite obnoxious. But we're smug in a different way. We're smug about our rationality, and they're smug about their holiness. And that's easier to escape. I don't buy into their vision of holiness. I don't buy into their beliefs about sin. And so the fact that I'm a sinner to them doesn't matter to me, but almost everyone accepts that being rational is important. And so to be smug about rationality is to offend in a deeper way, I think, the sensibilities of who we're talking to. And I think that is a mistake that atheists make. Not all the time, not all of us, but we often do, and I'm sure I have in the past plenty of times. I definitely did when I was younger. But I think it's really, really important not to. I mean, it's kind of inevitable to some extent. Like when we're saying we're right and you're wrong. I mean, you're kind of going to get a bit of that. But it's important to avoid that. To avoid this, like, it's not necessarily important to avoid it, but it makes it harder for a theist to talk to you in the same way that if a theist is saying, well, you're all going to go to hell, it makes it hard for us to want to talk to them. It makes it hard for them to want to talk to us if we're dismissing them as being less rational just because they have a different viewpoint than us. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I have one more little thing to say about that. Well, first of all, I agree with everything you said. I thought that was really very well put. That it is, I think it registers as more deeply offensive to be told that you're systematically irrational than to be told you're being naughty. You know, that because to us that's how it sounds. Oh, sin. Well, I don't even believe in sin, so I'm not too worried about it. But tell someone they're being systematically irrational, that they're just being willfully stupid. Boy, that cuts pretty deep. I mean, that is a conversation stopper, and we don't like it when they pull conversation stopping moves, and we shouldn't be doing it to them. So I really, really like what you said there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I realized that there is a way that they do this to us that's analogous to some extent, and that is when they say you're denying God that you know, the God that you know. This is closer than the you're a sinner kind of thing. It's rather than saying you're systematically irrational, it's saying you're systematically dishonest with yourself and others, and that is also quite deeply offensive. But
yeah, that's a really good point. But I want to sort of, if I can give a bit of advice to my fellow atheists, we have to be careful here. That's not just an ad hom. Of course, it can be tossed out that way. Yeah, you're just in love with your sin. That's and to hell with you. And they'll sometimes literally tell you to go to hell. But they don't all do that, of course. But I mean, sometimes that happens, right? But you have to understand that when they're saying that, that is part of their doctrine. That's not just an ad hom. That's not just a way of dismissing you. That is, in fact, their belief. And that's one of the things you have to challenge. And you can't just say, I'm going to write that off. You're just saying that to be insulting, right? If I say, look, your God strikes me as a moral monster, okay? If I say that merely to offend, then I'm being a dick, okay? But if I say that, and there are ways of, polite ways of saying that. I mean, well, one way of saying it politely is, look, I have to say, the God that you describe strikes me as a moral monster. But if you say, your God's a moral monster, well, that's not quite so nice. But I mean, there's a way of saying it. But no matter how you say it, what you're doing is you are offending what they think is most sacred. Of course, they're going to be upset about that. And it's understandable when they get upset, but really they shouldn't get so upset about it. It's what you think, and if we're going to have honest dialogue, you have to be able to say what you honestly believe. But so do they. And so when they come at you and they say you're just in love with your sin and you're denying the God you know exists, that's what they believe. That's part of their claim. That's not just an insult, and you shouldn't just let your blood boil when that happens. And as happened, just take that in stride, take that on board, and say, okay, here's why I think that's not right, and go on. Anyway, enough about that, I guess.
No, that's very good. And to expand upon that, I would say to some extent, for the atheist claim that religious people are systematically irrational, in some cases that is what they believe, and it's not just the attitude that they hold. I think that that's a dangerous belief. I think that's an incorrect belief. And I think that it is one that makes it limits our ability to talk to the religious. And so I would discourage us from holding that belief. But I mean, some people do believe that, and some people do just believe that the religious are systematically irrational. And maybe some of them are, but it's not useful to claim that they all are. I have met people who genuinely reject rationality as a concept. Mind you, they were hippies, not Christians. So different class there. But yeah, I have met people who are genuinely systematically irrational. They reject the very concept of rationality. But I don't think it's a claim to be made lightly. And I think that some atheists make it lightly or automatically, and that's unwise. Anyway.
Interesting.
How are we doing for time, John?
Pretty good. We're just passing an hour and a half here. We do have quite a bit to go through here, but yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit more to go through here, but I think we've covered quite a bit of it.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just give you guys one more quote here, and we can kind of talk about this. right towards the end of it, he kind of says that he's got one more point, and he kind of says like, "Let's stop for dinner," and then I'm going to go down here and drill a little deeper. So right afterwards, he says, "I must make apologies. The fact that so many people are placed before the full exposition of the evidence of God's existence and yet do not believe in Him has greatly discouraged us. We have therefore adopted measures of despair. Anxious to win your goodwill, we have again compromised our God. Noting that men do not see, we have conceded that what they ought to see is hard to see. In our great concern to win men, we have allowed that the evidence for God's existence is only probably compelling. And from that fatal confession, we have gone one step further down to the point where we have admitted, or virtually admitted, that it is not really compelling at all. And so we fall back upon testimony instead of argument. After all, we say, God is not found at the end of the argument. He is found in our hearts. And so we simply testify to men that we were once dead and now alive, once blind and now we see, and give up all intellectual arguments. So in here he's kind of giving a critique of other theologies, right? I believe that he's critiquing Arminianism in specifics, right? So
I think he's just critiquing a certain style of apologetics, actually, a more traditional style of apologetics, a more evidentialist style of apologetics there.
Yeah, maybe one that accepts that the evidence is hard to see, that you have to be compelled. And it seems like he wants to kind of deny that. He wants to say, no, the evidence is easy to see, it's just that you can't see it.
It seems more that he's kind of denouncing not evidentialist apologetics, but experientialist apologetics.
Yeah, the autonomy of human reason as the court of appeal here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. I'm surprised he didn't make that analogy right away. I know Saib makes that analogy quite a bit, and so I was surprised not to see it.
What analogy is?
That putting us in the place of judge over God. I'm not sure if it's in here.
He does not here maybe, but he does elsewhere.
I think in Defense of Christianity maybe, or maybe I'm thinking of Bahnsen, but one of those.
Bahnsen for sure does that.
I've read it in
Van Til, but I think I've read it elsewhere in Van Til. I think.
Yeah, and I was curious about that. I mean, it seems like a really obvious analogy, and I was surprised I didn't see it in this one.
Yeah. See, I mean, what he's sort of getting at there is, look, in an effort to reach people and explain their theology and provide an apologetic, he's saying we Christians have gone too far. That is, we have conceded too much. We have said, okay, let's assume there's no God. Let's, and let me try to build up evidence and stuff like that. In other words, think of it as sort of an attack on someone like William Lane Craig in a way. William Lane Craig is a Christian apologist, but he uses evidentialism primarily, and he'll, for instance, argue for the existence of the empty tomb and certain facts as he sees them described in the Gospels as pointing very strongly, if not conclusively, to a resurrection of Jesus. And what he's doing there is he's saying, well, let's look at what historians say. And he'll say, well, we'll use essentially a kind of minimal facts approach. We'll forego the theology. Let's just, consider these facts. Jesus was tried under Pontius Pilate. He was honorably buried. The tomb was found empty. And then some days later, his early Christian followers believed that he was resurrected and reported having appearances of the risen Jesus, something like that. And like Gary Habermas has something like 8 or 12, I can't remember. Michael Licona cites a different number. A lot of them use this minimal facts approach, where they cite a lot of facts that really don't presuppose the supernatural. They're just sort of mundane facts. And there's a lot of things like that. Cosmological arguments and stuff like that point to sort of facts about the universe. The teleological universe argument points to facts about organisms and the organization of the world and stuff like that. And the idea is we're going to start from just facts that we can all agree to that don't presuppose a God or anything like that, and we're going to build to a conclusion that a God exists. And I think what he's getting at there is, look, this is putting you in the position of the judge, who has to decide by his own lights, by using the autonomy of your own reason, or assuming the autonomy of your own reason, whether or not there's a God, and he thinks this is all wrong. And this is a strain that this is something that's echoed a lot by presuppositionalists. His protege was Greg Bahnsen, a philosopher and a presuppositional apologist, and he wrote an article, I just looked it up, called, and this is another one I would recommend that people read, whether they're presuppositionalists or whether they're atheists interested in this argument. It's called "The Impropriety of Evidentially Arguing for the Resurrection" by Dr. Greg Bahnsen. So the impropriety of evidentially arguing for the resurrection. It's an excellent article. It's not long, but it's sort of you'll sort of get the sense of what he's talking about there. Now, that article is sort of full of sort of Christian talk and citing verses and stuff like that. But the whole idea there is that it is literally impiety. It's improper to proceed evidentially. You're conceding too much. You are not assuming the things that you assume, and you can't get to where you want to go this way. And I think Cornelius Van Til, in that passage that you were quoting, is saying, listen, we have often, as apologists, fail as apologists. We have been too nice. We have conceded too much. We have done a disservice to our God. Our God is not happy when we do this. And in a way, this is a way of saying we should have been using presuppositionalism all this time. And things might have gone better for us if we had been doing it right all along, as he sees it. So I think that might be what he's getting at there.
I agree with you. I think that probably is what he's getting at. But I'm going to offer an alternative reading.
No way.
What? No, I agree with
Please
you.
do.
I think you're absolutely right that is what he meant. But it can be interpreted in this way as well, and I agree with this. What he's saying is that the Christian that kind of, or not necessarily what he's saying, but what it could appear to be saying is the Christian that backs away from, admits that there is not sufficient evidence for it, is like the Darwinian biologist who says, well, maybe there isn't that much evidence for evolution. Like, you got to have the personal experience of evolution. And what he's saying is that there's so much evidence that doing this, or not necessarily what he's saying, but what it could be interpreted as being said, is that there's so much evidence that conceding that one could be rationally not a theist is absurd. And to concede that point and then to argue on the basis of personal experience is just not going to work. And I agree with him completely that if someone is arguing based on the basis of personal experience, I'm not going to take that as being true. Like, I just can't assume that your personal experience is true and you interpreted it correctly. If you're going to convince me, it'll be through evidence. And if you're going to convince me with evidence, it better be damn convincing. So I agree with that interpretation, but I think what Ozzy said is probably closer to what he meant.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. There's ways you could read it. When I read through it, I kind of put a star beside. We have allowed that the evidence for God's existence is only probably compelling, and from there, the next sentence he says is, and from that fatal confession, we have gone a step further to the point where we admitted, or virtually admitted, that it is not really compelling at all. And I don't know, I kind of took exception to that, as if he was suggesting that the evidence should be 100% certain before we can consider it compelling. That's how it seemed to me anyways, because he's saying it's, if we admit it's only probably compelling, which means most likely compelling, then somehow that would make it less, or just admitting the possibility that it's not compelling is somehow destroying your argument, right? Or makes your argument worthless. And in some ways, I kind of understand his point there. There is that idea that once you open up the possibility of you being wrong, it's possible that you could be wrong, right? I mean, if it was impossible that you could be wrong, it would be a much stronger position for you to argue from. And I think maybe that's what he was saying there. That they're disappointed that people aren't getting it from the full exposition of the evidence, right? That no matter how much evidence they seem to throw at people, they're still not getting the results that they desire, and so he's kind of suggesting that it's because we're giving them probable evidence. We're giving them evidence that's based on probability and not on the certainty that he seems to think he has with his presup argument.
Can I suggest the analogy of the Darwinian biologist again, because I think it's appropriate in this sense. I don't think that any biologist arguing with a creationist should say, well, maybe it's not true. I mean, while it is a hypothetical, the evidence is so compelling that admitting it is counterproductive. It is not an accurate representation of the facts. It's not an accurate representation of our beliefs about the facts. And in this case, in his mind, the facts are so compelling that it would be dishonest and absurd to admit that anyone wouldn't be convinced of them if they had access to them. But I agree in part with your analysis, or I agree quite a bit with your analysis in some ways, or at least it is quite possible that what he's saying is that sorry, I lost my train of thought. I may have said something irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on topic there. And I mean, yeah, he says that we rely on testimony instead. And then a little while later, he says something like this one kind of confused me. It says
testament is the argument, and the argument is the testament, or something.
Yeah,
like that?
a testimony that is not an argument is not a testimony either. Just as an argument that is not a testimony is not even an argument.
Yeah,
that one kind of threw me for a second, and then I think it kind of clarified, or it kind of crystallized a little when I was re-listening to me and Ozzy's discussion about presuppositionalism, and I thought it might have something to do with referring to internal versus external justification. Would the testimony be like internally justifying a claim, and then the argument being like you're externally justifying it? I'm just trying to grasp what he's saying with this.
Yeah, I know. I have to confess, I read that emptily. I read it and like I read this years ago, and then when I knew that this hangout was going to happen, I skimmed it, and then just before we started, I read it through in full, and I read that, and I was scratching my head, what the heck is he trying to get at here? I confess, I don't get it. I read that emptily.
Cool. So as long as everybody else read it and didn't understand it, I don't feel so bad. Like,
yeah. I do. I mean, I don't think I understood it, but I do have a possible interpretation. What he might be saying is that an argument for God without a testimony of God's existence is not an argument for God at all, and that a testimony for God's existence without an argument for his existence, in this case the presuppositionalist argument, is not much of a testimony. That may be what he's getting at, but it's phrased really poorly if that's actually what he meant. But
that would take it. Yeah.
Sorry.
I take that implies. Like, I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
Yeah.
Seems kind of nonsensical, frankly.
Cool.
Could I return to another point that we made earlier?
Please.
Absolutely.
That last point talking about before. Oh darn! I'm just trying to get something up here. Where I was talking about the sort of this idea of there's an impiety in evidentialism and stuff like that. Well, one of and then you read a quote about how where Van Til says something about we've effectively conceded too much. It's not going to be a certainty. Oh, geez, what was that?
Yeah, it's only probably compelling instead of it's only probably compelling, and by admitting that you say that it's virtually not compelling.
Right. Okay. That's important because this is one of the ideas in presuppositionalism, is that the argument that you give has to convey, ultimately, the full conviction. You don't want a set of apologetical arguments that lead a person to think, yeah, probably Jesus rose from the dead, and therefore it's likely that God exists, and therefore maybe I'm saved if I accept Christ as my Savior. That's not good enough. What you have to have is the full conviction of the joy and the hope that is within us, as it says in the good book. That's what you need. You need an apologetic that completely demolishes the doubts, and that's what presuppositionalism is supposed to do. That you're just supposed to blow away every other worldview. any worldview that includes
Not God.
not God in it, that God doesn't exist, it has to be proved to be impossible, and by the impossibility of the contrary, God has to exist, and there you go. You get the full conviction, and so that's where I think that was going. I'm sorry to drag us back, but that concept of full conviction is really, really important to presuppositionalists.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It almost seems like it's not quite. I think you've called it a certainty fetish at one point. It's not quite that, but
Yeah.
you have to be so convicted that you have to be so compelled that there's virtually no room for error.
I want to welcome Elijah Lees to the conversation.
Absolutely, good to see you, Elijah.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all again.
Hello, good to see you again.
Yeah, you were talking about the issue of it has to convey the certainty. The famous Bonsenstein debate. He famously starts that debate with saying, I want to distinguish very clearly between proof and persuasion. And I've heard other presuppositionalists talk about that or use that phrase since, and I think that's kind of where they're coming from when they say that, is like they want to make sure that even if their opponent at the end of the debate says, hey, I don't buy it, that they have set this up at the beginning to say, look, nevertheless, this is a conclusive apologetic.
Yeah, it gives them, at least internally, gives them great comfort, I bet, to have that sense of complete certainty, and have at least that standard to be aiming for is I think that's admirable. I don't know if it's possible, but they could.
Well, you have to remember also they approach, before they ever began thinking about their formulating an argument of any kind, they already believed they had that, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't come from the apologetic. The full conviction comes from sort of this inner witness of the Holy Spirit, and this action upon your part that happens. That is what is so firmly conclusive.
Yeah,
and comes from it. It's not from just hyper rational stuff.
It's a combination of the experience.
Go ahead, Elijah.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you, I saw a lecture Sai gave early on his apologetical method, and it started out with him describing reasons people say they believe in Christianity, and he asked kind of the crowd, rhetorically, do you believe in Christianity because you feel so good, you feel God's presence when you pray? And he said, well, that's not why I believe in Christianity. I believe in Christianity because Christianity is true. So that kind of thinking it sets you up to have that absolute confidence all the time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you don't even have to be a presuppositionalist to sort of think and talk that way as a Christian, because, think of someone like William Lane Craig, who mostly promulgates an evidentialist style of apologetics. If you read his book, Reasonable Faith, right in the intro or preface, I can't remember now, he says, that, if you ask him why does he believe, he didn't come to believe on the basis of any of these arguments. That's none of that is necessary. What is sufficient and necessary is this, what he calls this inner testimony of the Holy Spirit. That's what does it. That's more than enough, and it doesn't matter. And he even says, even if all these arguments were demolished, he would still believe. He's not believing by his own admission on the basis of these arguments. So it's a kind of dual truth model, that there's two ways of knowing that this is true, and either one of them is sufficient. As it turns out, one of them is absolutely necessary. And when you think about it, in light of sort of Christian history and the idea that there were martyrs and stuff like that, the idea of full conviction, of giving your life to Christ, Christianity can be a very, very serious and morally demanding religion, where you have to sort of take this unflinching, critical look at yourself and turn your whole life around and purge yourself of bad habits and bad ways of thinking, even, and that's not an easy thing to do. and if you're willing to sort of be beheaded or tortured or something like that under certain regimes for it, well, you better have the full convictions because nothing else is going to do that, right? I mean, you're never going to get to that unless you've got this full conviction. So something like that has to be an ingredient in the equation as they see it.
To comment on the theme of one of the threads of this paper that I think is very valuable, I would say that there are a number of atheists that take the same approach. They say, why are you an atheist? Because there is no God. I'm an atheist because it's true. And I would say that it is equally weak when
Yeah.
and it's important to not do that. But I'd like to bring it back and point out that we do it as well sometimes, or our kind, to use an ill-defined term, does it sometimes.
Yeah, I call them presupposition. I can't even pronounce it now. I've had too much beer. Presupposition. Oh dear. Presuppositionalist. Tag on atheist at the end.
Presupposition. Oh, I can't say it either.
Yeah, it's really hard to say actually. That's it.
Gosh. Hey,
but
type it in the chat. All right.
Okay, well, or presuppositional atheists. I mean, there are presuppositional atheists out there. There are people who will actually why are you an atheist? Bill will be, because I respect the truth, or I'm interested in the truth, or geez, we're all interested in the truth, that can't be the way of putting it, right? And to say it even more baldly, God is really to beg the question is talk about presuppositions,
Yeah, I got to say though,
two can play that game.
To be fair to the presuppositionalists, that's not even their presupposition. As we were talking in the fundamentally flawed post show, it's important.
Right.
In some ways, I would say the atheist presupposition is weaker because the presuppositionalists at least have a hypothetical argument for why it's impossible to not believe in God, or impossible to have a coherent worldview and not believe in God. But the atheist doesn't even claim that for the most part.
Well, no, I mean, most atheists who will clumsily say, I'm an atheist because there's no God, when pressed, will give you their reasons. They'll say, well, there's no evidence of a God, and so they have a hypothetical argument that they can trot out, right? But the problem is, stating it that way is obviously question begging, and just makes the other person look at you like, well, oh, okay, I see. There's no God. That's why you're an atheist. Oh, okay, now I see. This is not persuasive, and it makes one look kind of silly.
No, I agree, and just that's all I was commenting on is the remembering not to call presuppositionalists those who presuppose the existence of God for the sake of presupposing the existence of God.
Right.
Right, that's just the theist. I take your meaning though. I mean that is an important point. I mean, a presuppositionalist could be in reference to almost any belief or background. You could be an Islamic presuppositionalist, or I'm sure there's Buddhist presuppositionalist if you look hard enough. But I don't know exactly how you'd describe them or what the tenets of that would be. It'd have to be case by case, I think. Cool. Well, we're just getting up to the 2-hour mark here. I was curious. Let's see if I can just find this quote here. I just had one more I was looking at. Let's see here. If anybody else has anything else to add to that, I'd be happy to hear from you. Elijah, you just showed up, and I know you're pretty well versed in presup. Were you watching us from before here, or?
No, I wasn't able to. I just happened to see the link when I logged in. I figured I would have missed it, or that it wouldn't have started yet, honestly. I haven't been following anything so far that we've been talking about. I mean, I know we're talking about the paper, right? But
yeah, absolutely. Why I Believe in God by Cornelius Van Til, which is
I didn't expect to be here, so I didn't actually get to freshen up on it. It's been years since I read it, and the other materials by him and Bonson. It's been a while, but I mean, what are you looking at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of wrapping it up, trying to draw some threads together here. Let me think here. The one thing that I did see, and I thought this was like a really, maybe I just thought it was the presuppositional stance when I first read it, but here maybe I'll just read it out and you guys just tell me. Nor do I pretend, of course, that once you have been brought face to face with this condition, that you can change your attitude. No more than an Ethiopian can change his skin or a leopard his spots can you change your attitude. You have cemented your colored glasses firmly on your face that you cannot even take them off when you sleep. Freud had not even a glimpse of the sinfulness of sin as it controls the human heart. Only the great physician, through his blood atonement on the cross and by the gift of his Holy Spirit, can take those colored glasses off and make you see facts as they are, facts as evidence, as inherently compelling evidence for the existence of God. So I thought that was a great summary of it. I don't know if you guys thought that too.
That's a great summary of the underlying Reformed theology behind presuppositionalism. It really doesn't have that much to do with presuppositionalism at all. At all. It's really the Calvinism that has in my opinion, has to be the theological position of anyone who does presuppositionalism and wants to do it accurately or consistently. But yeah, that's the whole idea that human beings cannot choose to turn to God on their own. Only the Holy Spirit has to come down and change our hearts for us.
So not being super familiar with Calvinism, is that similar to the idea of total depravity?
It's partly total depravity. That's the condition wherein we are completely as depraved as we can be. We can't turn to God on our own. We couldn't if we wanted to, and we don't, right? We can't force ourselves to choose it. But it's also the idea of irresistible grace, which is the I in TULIP, which I don't know if you're familiar with TULIP. It's the acronym for the 5 points of Calvinism. But the I, irresistible grace, is when the Holy Spirit decides, or when Christ decides that you're one of the people who he predestined to be saved. He converts you beside yourself. He makes you believe, and you can't do anything about it. You become a Christian against your will. Not against your will, because you have no free will to begin with, but he opens your eyes to it and makes it where once you realize that it's true, you would never turn away from it, right? And they have all kinds of little loopholes.
They don't all deny free will. I mean, a lot of Calvinists will they believe in predestination and free will, but then it gets complicated.
Yeah, they do. They believe that we have a free will, just that our will will never choose God on its own because of the depravity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's not like a determinism or anything of the nature.
Right. Right. So this all goes to this doctrine of grace that you can't see right. The reason you can't see what I'm saying here is, well, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do about it, and there's nothing I can do about it. This is something that the Holy Spirit has to do to you, and this is why, this is sort of in keeping with this theme of him trying to explain. This is how the world looks to us, and this is why we answer you as we do, and why our answers may seem so very queer to you. It's because of what we believe, and what we believe is that you can't just change your mind about this. It's not up to you, and in a way, though, it's a kind of writing yourself a hall pass, or sort of an excuse. This is why, if my argument is unpersuasive, well, don't blame me. Don't even blame you.
It's your hardness of your heart, basically, is what it is, and you can't change it. It's also the reason why they're so comfortable saying that the job of the apologist, the presuppositionalist, does not believe it's their job to convince us, right, that their argument is valid. It's just to make us shut our mouths, basically. It's to silence those who would criticize God and to show us the folly of our worldview, but not necessarily for the sake of converting us by any means, because they don't believe they can. They don't believe any argument can convert someone.
Yeah, but they are commanded essentially by Scripture in the New Testament to always have an answer, and this is in part because at any point God can use anyone and anybody's words as sort of the vehicle, the occasion for the Holy Spirit, interceding.
Yeah, they would say, even though they believe that using evidentialist apologetics is sinful, they will readily admit that, hey, if somebody comes to faith by it, God can use anything. God can use a serial killer if he wanted to, I suppose. I mean, anything can be a tool to bring people to faith, and whatever works, praise God.
I wasn't. Are all of the presuppositionalists Calvinists, or?
No, but overwhelmingly so.
Okay. Yeah.
It definitely helps to have that that theology backing you up, I'd say.
I say nowadays with it, we have a more mass-produced version of the argument, right, with Psi, and it's so stripped down and bare bones that I don't think any particular theology needs to be assumed ahead of time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to know anything about Christianity to use this argument properly.
I think you and me were discussing that yesterday a little bit. That it really is. I mean, the cycle inversion is sort of stripped down to be exported to Christianity in general. They are trying to branch out a little bit of the very Calvinist sects.
I thought I heard someone say yesterday that they didn't think Psi was a Calvinist.
Yeah, he might not be.
It's entirely possible, but I don't know. Some of the stuff he says does seem to suggest that he holds a very Calvinist theology. But
well, I want to, and it's probably unfair to make these kind of judgments, but in my opinion, having watched Psi for a long time, I think he has an unexpected level of fame, and at this point, I think his apologetic informs his theology 100%. I do not think he is genuine.
Yeah, I have no sense, but I mean.
But I have no sense of being genuine either. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have no. What I mean is, I have no sense of what his theology is. But my sense of him is that he delights far too much in stumping people and humiliating people and dominating them, and which is why he sort of stresses this sort of shutting the mouths of atheists. It is this stripped down version of presuppositionalism exports very well, precisely because if you've been sort of on the receiving end of charges of systematic irrationality and bad arguments and bad evidence, it's finally nice to be told by someone, oh, no, we are the owners of logic and reason and rationality. This is in our bailiwick, and they have to defend the very use of evidence and reasons and logic and all of that. So I mean, that's got to be, terribly emotionally satisfying to turn the tables on people that way.
Especially bringing this back to something we were saying earlier, because a lot of atheists are kind of smug about their claim that the religious are systematically irrational, then it would be particularly satisfying.
Yeah.
But I think I find Psi offensive, not necessarily. I find him offensive because he turns a question that I'm really interested in into a debating tactic, and I find that morally reprehensible. I mean, I'm genuinely interested in justifying my knowledge, but to do it in such a dishonest and aggressive way, and to do it for the purpose of shutting people down that don't understand philosophy, I find that frustrating.
Well, I don't believe. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, but I don't think that that's what presuppositionalism is about in general, and yeah, I think that it is actually kind of an interesting position, if not a well-defended one.
Right. Yeah. That's my view. Actually, I think it's actually interesting, but not very well defended and well argued. And I mean, I just don't think. I also think that it's just not a very good evangelical tool. Now, I mean, as we've already stated, that for Calvinists that doesn't matter so much, But for those who are interested in this or tempted by this apologetic, it just doesn't seem to convince anyone or persuade anyone. I think that we in the sort of the atheist camp have been sort of burning a lot of fuel arguing against this because it's novel and people have been stumped by it, and they feel like I got to sort this out and get back at this. But really, this is. I said this before in another video with Jon F. McDropout. If this was the only apologetic out there on offer, I'd put my feet up and take a holiday, because they're just not going to convince anybody with this. The only Christians they're going to create with this are the ones that they breed. This isn't going to work. It's not very persuasive. This is not going to take people who are on the fence and bring them over to Christianity, I don't think. I think what it's going to do is, I think evidentialism and sort of traditional proofs of God, like the cosmological argument and the teleological argument, are much, much more likely to move a person in that direction. I don't know if others agree with me on this, but that's my view of it.
I do feel the same way. Yeah. When I hear it, it definitely seems like it's more of preaching to the choir sort of thing. It's meant to kind of reinforce amongst the ranks. And just because it's so confusing, I think when you're inside the ranks and someone gives you a very complex argument and sort of there's this sort of confusion because it's on your side. I think there is the tendency to just say, oh well, that confusion is actually the proof that it's just so complex and so true that I just can't understand it, right? That's the proof that it's God, because I can't understand God and I can't understand that, so clearly the two are connected, right?
Yes.
So there is sort of this weird reinforcement of I don't understand it, therefore it must be true.
Yes. It's sophisticated.
Very much so. And I like that idea. That it's sort of a response to feeling like they were on the kind of the tail end of intellectual discussion, right? I think how does he say it here? When he goes into it, I mean, he's talking about how what we're looking for here is a unity in our worldview, like this coherence in our experience, a unity of experience, he calls it. And he says, there is no unity in your life. You want no God who by his counsel provides the unity you need. Such a God, you say, will allow for nothing new, and so you provide your own unity. And then a little later down, he says, but on the other hand, my belief in God, I do have unity of my experience, and it's not a result of my autonomous determination, but it's a result of something, he says, higher to mine and prior to mine, based on God's counsel. And there's this idea that that instead of trading in your own intellectual thoughts, you can trade in God's intellectual thoughts. And I think that's a very compelling argument if you're inside the faith already.
Exactly. If they can't defend presuppositionalist apologetics, it's not because presuppositionalist apologetics are undefensible. It's because they don't understand it, and why would they? It's God's mind. Yeah, no, I agree. It gives them an out. It's very convenient.
Yeah, I think one of the most telling lines in this whole paper here is one I'm just about to read here, and it's this. My unity is that of a child who walks with his father through the woods. This child is not afraid because its father knows all and is capable of handling all situations. And I think that pretty much sums it up right there. I mean, that certainty is based on an authority figure who they view as benevolent and omnipotent, right? And there's, that is I can see, a great amount of comfort coming from that argument, when it concludes in that, right?
Yeah, one of the unique things about, I don't know of any other argument or method of apologetics that any Christian would claim is outlined in detail how to do it in the Bible itself. And I think that's a huge part of this too. It kind of plays into that because I've listened to presuppositionalists defend their method based on the Bible, where they say that, oh no, these verses here in Proverbs clearly spell out how we're supposed to do this, and the misinterpretation of those texts is just mind-blowing to me. But that goes into it too. Like if this method is shown how to do, if we're shown how to do this in the Bible itself, then it cannot possibly be wrong. It may, and like everything else in the Bible, we may struggle to understand it. We may have to grow in our knowledge of it, right? But at the end of the day, we can be confident that however little of it we understand and how poorly we articulate it, we are doing it exactly like God has told us to do it specifically.
Or in the case of some people, very well articulated, but still not very convincing. Like, what's his name? The guy that wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. Oh, what's his name?
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis, yeah. Very, very articulate, but still not convincing.
Yeah, he has some really bizarre arguments. He convinced me a lot in my early days as a believer, but I gave him up pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't know. I just love this document as far as just being, almost what's the word? Almost like they're admitting so much up front in this document. They lay out really well, and I think any atheist who is interested in presuppositionalism should probably read this. I think I would echo you guys' sentiment that this is probably one of the more useful documents in understanding where precept's coming from, not necessarily the argument itself, but it gives you where a presuppositionalist may be coming to you from, and I think that's useful.
Yeah, where it's short is on the actual development of the actual argument, and it's also missing how they find this in the Bible. Elijah was alluding to this, like presuppositionalists. They have to explain, where were the presuppositionalists, 500 years ago? Where were they, 1,000 years ago, right? Like this seems very newfangled, right? So they've got to go in and do some proof texting, find, things that they can pull out and establish that no, this is what Paul was doing in Corinth and Galatia and stuff like that. This is what he was doing, and this is what we should have been doing all along. And then they sort of can look back through the history of theology, and they can say, yeah, see here, he was doing it here, and so was doing it there. And there's some truth in that, but not as much as they'd like.
To some respect, though, like personally, I'm not convinced. I don't think the argument being traditional makes it any stronger, and it being new makes it any weaker, to me at least, as a non-believer. But to a believer, they may very well find it much stronger if it's traditional. But I personally don't care. I mean, if it's new, well, whatever, it's an argument. But
well, I mean, within the Protestant faiths, well, within Catholicism, I mean, they all think that that sort of the way they're doing things is the way it's always been done, and should always have been done, and you ask yourself, where were the Protestants in the 8th century? Well, they didn't exist yet. They wouldn't exist for centuries more, right? Well, their understanding of it is that, well, no, the church kind of lost its way, and it took people like Martin Luther and Calvin and others to sort of help us find our way and sort of re-express the faith and the articles of faith and wrestle Christianity out of the hands of Roman Catholicism and put it back into the hands of ordinary Christians who could practice it right. And so this might just be sort of seen as the same kind of thing. We've gone astray in our apologetics. This is the proper way that it should have been done, and we have forsaken too much with these traditional styles of apologetics.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that for Protestants, I mean, the fact that as long as they can trace it back to the Bible in some way, they
Right.
don't care what happened. They don't not care what came between then and now. I mean, because they assume that most of the church, the history of the church, including most Protestant denominations that aren't them today, are astray anyway, right? They don't particularly care what was traditional and what developed over time, and like I said, as long as they're getting back to the Bible, it's almost a mark in their favor, really, if this is something that's been hidden, the mysteries of God that have been hidden in the Word, and then they discover it right nowadays.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that worked for Paul.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll just read one more quote here, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll get you guys to give me some of your final thoughts, maybe, and if you don't have any final thoughts, then you can just swear at me and leave, or if you want. Well, just here, just let me read this out here, and we'll go for it. This is exactly the sort of God that I need. This is right at the end of the paper here. So this is exactly the sort of God that I need. Without such a God, without the God of the Bible, the God of authority, the God who is self-contained and therefore incomprehensible to men, there would be no reason in anything. No human being can explain in the sense of seeing through all things, but only he who believes in God has the right to hold that there is an explanation at all. Now, I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that. To me, that I don't know. I get kind of up in I don't know. It gets my dander up a little bit to have someone suggest that I can't know an explanation, or that knowledge is somehow inaccessible to me. And I know that's not what he's saying there, but he's definitely phrasing it in that way. And so I was curious to get your guys' thoughts on that. Just as a parting thing, because that kind of ties into cyclones, which is something I was it's almost inevitable that we're going to discuss them when we're talking about presuppositionalism, because it is kind of the forum that does kind of get in our face quite a bit these days. And so I was just curious if you guys thought that was are the cyclones wrong in reading it that way? That perhaps, explanation is, you don't have a right to an explanation if you're not using or presupposing a God at the base of it.
Well, they think that you're at odds with yourself, right? You're trying to take this machine gun that's mounted on an emplacement, and you're just trying to shoot at the emplacement that the machine gun is standing on, and it can't really be done. There's no rational way to do this. It's self-contradictory. You're just being inconsistent with yourself, and the cyclones are sometimes talk about like, well, you can't have knowledge. Well, the way that what they should be putting it is, well, within the conceptual resources of your worldview, knowledge is incoherent. It's a meaningless concept. It's only within my worldview that knowledge is possible. But they don't actually deny that other people do have knowledge, because there in fact is a God, and that God is the guarantor of our beliefs, the reliability of our senses and reason and all of that stuff. But they do think that you are blocked certain kind of knowledge, and that's the kind of knowledge that can only be directly bestowed by God. So, what Van Til is alluding to in that last bit is this idea that, look, my apologetic is not going to be persuasive to you. That's not my fault. In a sense, that's not even your fault. The Holy Spirit has to take some action here. But you at least need to understand how I see it and why I say what I do. It is sort of internal to the logic of how I view the world that I say these things. It's not, I'm not just trying to be a dick when I say these things. This is part of my worldview, and part of my worldview is that certain kinds of knowledge are denied to you, and that my apologetic is not going to be very persuasive to you. That's what I would predict on my worldview. That's how he sees it.
Sure, Elijah, you got anything to add to that, or a final thought even?
It ends like a sermon, a little bit of poetry, a little bit of hey, at the end of the day, it's all about finding deeper meaning in life, right? Mm-hmm. Which is how these things usually end, right? That little chance to get at you and sort of a really have you step back and in that moment of quiet and think about what he's just said, right? But I do think that he is being genuine in this article. I think this is probably as honest as these guys get, is when they're talking this way. You know what I mean? When they're really, I do think that he really does live his life, or he thinks that he lives his life this way, right? With God and everything, providing the foundation for all meaning. I mean, I think there are people like him. I've known people like who say, and I believe them when they say it, that if someone could show them there was no God, they would just kill themselves, right? There would be nothing, no point to anything. And I think, and I realize he's talking specifically about reason, right, and as in rationality, but I do think it translates over to a reason for living at all. Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, very much so. Jibran, I would love to hear your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, this is his first real presentation of the argument. Or really presenting the consequences in a sort of forthright manner. He kind of beats around the bush through the entire thing. But this is where he really lays his cards on the table and says, your basic epistemic system is incoherent unless you assume the existence of my God. He doesn't provide the argument for that, and I think that's the flaw. But it is interesting to see him talking in this very honest manner. I agree. The entire article is interesting for that reason. It's a very thought-provoking piece of work in general. And to some extent, I guess to his final point, I want to answer his challenge. I want to learn how to justify my knowledge. I can't do it. I can't justify my knowledge, but I'd like to at some point. So I don't know. I can't say much to that, but that's my opinion.
I think that's a valiant goal, I believe.
Yeah. I guess it's been a very lovely conversation.
Absolutely, guys. I would just like to echo that. I mean, this has been such a pleasure. Ever since I've read this, I've really wanted to discuss it with somebody else, just get some other ideas and points of view. And this has been really enlightening, got me a lot to think about. So I'd just like to thank all you guys for your participation. Elijah, sorry we couldn't get you in there a little earlier. I hope you have fun at your Hobbit movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean that's what it's all about, man. I'm excited. I do apologize. I wish I could have been here. I feel like I missed out on a lot.
Do you have your elf suit on?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No hairy feet.
He's going as a dwarf.
No. I'm transporting the real nerds. I'm not one of the real nerds. Though I'm pretty close. I will give you that.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Maybe I'll just.
Thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I really respect all your guys' opinions on this, and I'm glad we could all get together and talk about it. So I'm just going to end the hangout here real fast, and if anybody wants to hang around and just talk or chat here, we can do that. But again, Left Coast Atheists will like to thank you guys for this wonderful discussion.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. It's very fun.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Good night.